Burns has taught 15 different courses at Marian, and he tells me that most of them, or all of them, will be incorporated in some way this talk. So it's going to be a major learning experience. Jerry's also the recipient of the 1997 Intercontinental Award for Excellence in Teaching, and his skills clearly not wane. He's also about to embark on his third Studies Abroad opportunity, and from what I understand, will be shamelessly promoting it during his talk.
Shamelessly.
Shamelessly, yes. Those are his words. This time he's going to Ireland. He has spent two fall semesters at Carlin in England, and has been one of the favorite faculty members that students usually seek out when they go. Without further ado, I'd like to present Dr. Jerry Burns. He's going to be talking on the evolution of language and incivility.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Would you rather me stand behind the lectern and stay strictly on script, or would you rather if I kind of walk around and have to rely on my impromptu eloquence if there is such? Well, I feel a little more comfortable walking around. Did everybody hear me? Did everybody get a copy of get a copy of the crossword puzzle? Oh, okay, sorry. That's a good sign, actually. I don't actually bribe people to come from my classes to come to the presentations, but I did do a little bit of persuasive activity, and that is people who successfully complete the crossword puzzle, which you should be able to do if I get through my presentation, and if you listen carefully enough. If you complete the crossword and turn it in, and your crossword is picked from the lottery, you can be the happy recipient of two things that I'll probably do today. Anguished English, I'll probably use some of that, and Crazy English by Richard Lederer. So, if there are any of the questions that I don't answer in the course of the presentation, please alert me. So, when I thought about uncivil discourse, which actually I started thinking about when I was in college, so I've had a long time to think about it, it occurred to me that it was a really, really complex subject, and I'm sure this has occurred to you after listening to some of the presentations already. And when I'm thinking of complex subjects, this is kind of the sort of place where I'd like to be. I know I'm not thinking anything there, but I'm keeping an open mind there. And that's the kind of place where I like to muse. And here's the shameless part. We will be in that area of Ireland in about 6 weeks, and we hope to do it again next year. So tune in. I see some people in the class who are embarking on that trip. But let's face it, when you're all by yourself thinking deep thoughts without bouncing them off anybody or without using other people as a sounding board, you can end up with some pretty strange ideas and recirculating your own thoughts. Not a good idea. So I'm going to have a lot of pictures on here of myself, and you might think, well, he's a real ham. I would rather have you think that, gee, he enters into dialogue with a lot of different people, doesn't he? So, and that's kind of what we're doing, and really we'll be seeing some headlines and images. I think everybody here will find something that will probably offend them. And there will be probably something that will make you roll your eyebrow. Maybe you should try that right now. Practice rolling your eyebrows. Or probably something that will make you wince. Try your wince muscles there. Anita, hi. Nice to see you. So, in any event, I didn't want to just think on my own, and I wanted to enter into dialogue. And one of the nice things of traveling abroad is even after you've left, you can still kind of go back there in your mind. And I went back to Dublin in my mind, and I had a little mental conversation. He didn't say much. He was pretty stony-faced and steely-eyed, but that's James Joyce. If you're a writer and you get discouraged, think of James Joyce. The Dubliners was rejected 10 times before it was accepted for publication. And then most of his works have also been on the list of banned books. But has the banning of books like mine because of offensive language compromised great literature? Gee, that question alone would take us the hour and a half, wouldn't it? I talk to some other creatures. I like to talk to people either on my own level or of superior intellect. And at the top of Mount Snowdon in Wales, I dubbed this person, this creature, Mona Lisa. And I think you can tell by that beautiful smile. And she didn't say much, but the question that formed in my mind in interacting with her was, why are humans so good at using language to pull the wool over our eyes? As old Mark Twain once said, a lie can travel halfway around the world while truth is still putting on its pants. So I think you'll probably see some language like that. And then I also talk to, and maybe this should be like a disclaimer about my talk, beware of the bull. And can a creature communicate offensive ideas just by remaining silent? You can make me really mad today if you just don't react at all. I'll take the eyeball rolling any day to complete silence. In Bryant's Puddle in Dorset in southern England, I came across the most illustrious and famous personage. Lovely Rita is her name. And she asked in her own way, why do you say trash talking as though it's a bad thing? So I think we will find some trash talking of some ilk or another somewhere in this presentation. When I was in England, we were thinking of retirement options. And kind of low budget, the savings aren't very high, so this took me to meet Bob the donkey. He's the one on the left. And in his own way, he communicated this question to me. Has human language become more insulting and asinine in the 21st century than any time? And that's probably what you've been wondering for a lot of this whole symposium. And I'll be addressing that. Also, they really like to warn you in England, and there are a lot of rabbit holes, and I'm the curious type, so I'm always looking down. And there I found the rabbit, and you know what he said to Alice, but here's what he said to me. One word makes you smaller, and one word sorry. Rabbits are terrible spellers. So I think you'll see some words coming up that in some ways make some realities smaller and other realities larger. And you're wondering, okay, from all of that complexity, are you just kind of making things up as you go along, or do you actually have a thesis, Dr. Burns? That would be so boring. Well, it's not, but here is my thesis, just so you know. I do have one. And if I don't get through all of the components of it, you know what I would have been saying. And here's my thesis. I know it sounds like the beginning of a book. While language and literature have been conducting themselves in much the same way, the topic, of course, was supposed to be evolution. And I'm not sure that language has evolved very much. Sometimes it's changing, that's for sure. Sometimes predictably, sometimes unpredictably. And language from the get-go has always reflected objectionable aspects of human behavior and human nature, but ones that are pretty much irrepressible, I think you'd have to say. A convergence of factors, though, I think, in recent decades or so, has made the potential for offensive messages greater. Even though that's the case, I'm convinced that we should resist the temptation to overreact and to think that a doomsday scenario is about to descend on us. And because there are some constituencies out there that do try to manufacture fear, and I think there are constituencies that actually try to manage anger, not in terms of getting rid of anger, but actually to sort of create anger. And it's really easy to become angry, isn't it? Hopefully some of the slides I show will make you angry temporarily. But as members of an academic community and citizens of the United States, we should encourage language and literature that promote needed conversations. Whatever else we're doing here, that's what we're doing, isn't it? We're having big conversations, the kind that we really need to have. And on the other hand, I think we should denounce those messages, whether they're words, language, or imagery, that try to close off dialogue, that try and thwart our progress towards creating, where have you heard that phrase before? Creating a more perfect union. Anybody know where that's from? Actually, one of my students, I don't see you here now, you could actually recite that for us if we needed to. It's my favorite grammatical imperfection because you'll notice that more perfect is grammatically flawed, isn't it? It's, something's either unique or it's not. Something is either identical or it's not. Something's either perfect or it's not. More perfect? So, gee, where does this flawed language come from? Anybody know? There you go, the preamble to the Constitution of the United States. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. I'm not convinced, I'm not cynical enough to think that everybody I know is interested in creating a more perfect union, but I think a lot of us are, and I think what we're doing today and throughout this whole symposium, part of it is toward trying to do that, to create a more perfect union, even though at times our country seems, in Wisconsin particularly, seem more divided than ever. Let me go back. This is the second part. Probably I won't get to all of these points, but I kind of do the presentations the way teach in class. You can take the teacher out of the classroom, but you can't take whatever. You can't take the teacher out of the teacher. So I probably won't get off to all of these points, as I hardly ever do in class, but these are the factors, I think, that are operating that make offensive languages possibly more objectionable than ever before. The blurring of the lines between the public world and the private world. Have you noticed that? We've been getting a lot of encouragement for living in the moment. We also get a lot of development of gated communities, literally brick and mortar gated communities, but a bigger concern for me, the gated communities of the mind. Some of them talk radio, perhaps. Also, I probably won't go very far into this, but legislative redistricting in Wisconsin that puts us kind of in political silos, if you will, where people don't get enough opportunity to talk to one another and to form that kind of consensus and debate that needs to happen. A couple other things, absolutist black and white thinking, I think is another kind of threat to good conversations. A trend of regarding compromise as a dirty word. Even today, as we speak in Congress, there are a number of senators trying to block discussion of the issue of gun registration. They don't want that conversation to even happen. What about conversation are people afraid of? So, and then finally, the tendency to demonize people that we regard somehow as others. I mentioned that a more perfect union is grammatically flawed, and here's a person on the internet that really objects to that. She said, perfect is one of several adjectives that some usage writers call absolute, and this person gets really upset about it, as you can see. But to me, that's kind of a nice reality check that our language is imperfect, and so is our democracy, isn't it? And I think it's useful to keep that in mind. We're all working towards something greater. I'll probably say something in the talk where I say, whoops. But this is a part of the human condition, isn't it, that we make mistakes. This was a sign in our church for last Lent. If you make a really big mistake, they'll name a gate after it. So President Nixon started this policy with Watergate, and so some of the things you see you might find so offensive that you're tempted to call it Obama-gate, whatever, gate. Here's a little cartoon I came across. boy, he must think we're pretty stupid to fall for that again. And the one chicken is saying, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. And I think we do have that tendency to think, boy, things are just going to hell in a handcart, and things have never been this bad. But mostly it's not the sky that's falling. Mostly it's a lot of guys that are falling, and some women too. But mostly it's guys, and I say that as a representative of one half of the human race. Sometimes I am called upon to represent males, not usually. So if you're tempted to think the sky's falling, it's probably some guy that has a bad fall. There is a whole industry that based on apocalyptic thinking, though, where they benefit from having us think that the world is going to end. I mean, just think about it. Last year alone, how many times did people suggest that the world was going to end? Right? Here is a shop that just opened on 87th and Greenfield in Milwaukee called The Bunker. And basically to serve the needs of people who are, I hate to say it, bunker mentality, it's called a bunker, who really want to hunker down and prepare for the worst. And there are actually 3 million people in the United States, and there's actually a word for it called preppers. That was a new one for me. One of our key words at Marian, of course, one of our core concepts is community. I kind of feel, I don't know about you, I kind of feel like, well, if the world is going to end, we're in it together. You know, I'm not going to go in some bunker and let the rest of you starve or whatever. And so I think that, I hope that is part of your attitude too. Ever since, and even earlier than this, here in something we read in British Lit, is a doomsday prophecy. All Earth's kingdom is wretched. The world beneath the skies is changed by the work of the fate. Wealth is fleeting, friends are fleeting, woman's fleeting. And hasn't every generation, that was 975 about AD, and hasn't every generation ever since been convinced that the world's going to hell in a handbasket? So maybe it will, but who knows. I said that there would be things that would offend you, that might make you grimace, things that might make you roll your eyes. Does this make you grimace? Are we tempted to say, oh man, how many of you are offended by this? I hope so. Yeah, I am. I don't mind saying that. This was supposed to be an advertisement in India for a late model of Ford automobiles, and they wanted to show off how spacious the trunk was. And you can't see it over there, but all of the messages I have up here mostly will be asking, is this helpful? Does this open a conversation? Does this create dialogue? Or is this just offensive, and does it close off dialogue? The guys they were guys, and they did fall. Those guys did fall. They lost their jobs. And there was a lot, it went viral. So for better or worse, that is one thing in our society that tends to make things seem worse. They can go viral really quickly, and this did. The driver of the car wasn't all that excited about this ad either. Does anybody recognize that guy? There he go. Yeah. The former Prime Minister of Italy, Silvio Berlusconi. A cartoon rendering of him, of course. The timing was really bad on this, although I'm tempted to say, would the timing ever be good? But India, as you might have heard, there's a national conversation, kind of like the ones we're having, about women getting raped in India, and boy, talk about bad timing. Now, before you're tempted to say, oh, we could never have objectionable representations about women like that in the United States, this ad was in some of our lifetimes, probably not youngish youths, but blow on her face and she'll follow you everywhere. How about the timing of that? I don't know. But this is just last summer in New York City. We apologize for the whistling construction workers, but man, you look good. So, somewhere we soon, please pardon our duster and other assorted inconveniences. Evidently, a lot of people were, well, they did a little questioning. Here's what's different between now and then, is when they did the ad about blowing in her face to follow you anywhere, they didn't do a little survey. Does that offend you or not? This one they did. Was that amusing? Was it offensive? You don't care. A lot of people found it offensive. Here's an ad from the 50s. Christmas morning, she'll be happier with a Hoover. I'm not sure that the Hoover company's still in existence, but I think they have different marketing strategies now. And you might even have guys today. It's possible. I'm speaking for the half of us in the world. It's possible you would have guys that would object to it too. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does my wife. 50s, 2010 that was actually. Now, President Obama just had to apologize the other day. I don't think he would put this on the scale of the Ford Motor ad, but he was introducing the Attorney General in California, Kamala Harris, and among her other qualifications, he said that she was the best looking. Here are the other things he said. She's brilliant, and she's dedicated, she's tough. She also happens to be by far the best looking Attorney General. It's true, come on. Do you suppose there was a response to, hey, what's the problem? You said she's good looking. There were a lot of negative responses to that, and he apologized. Here's the thing, though, she accepted the apology. So, now those of you who heard this ad about New York City trying to get rid of sugary drinks over 16 ounces, there's probably a big range of responses to that. But whatever your response to that ad was, to that campaign was, I think you probably want this ad from the 50s to be revised. For a better start in life, start cola earlier. How soon is too soon? And I don't think you'd be likely to see this kind of marketing today either. Okay. Free for chubbies. Right? You're not going to find that kind of marketing campaign. However, did anybody hear this story? This was just last week. Target was marketing this dress. Right? So you've heard it, right? They were marketing this dress, and the regular size dresses and the smaller sizes were labeled as heather gray. But the plus size were marketed as manatee gray. You might be thinking, hey, what's the matter with being compared to, an endangered species? And, the early settlers, coming from this country, being a long time at sea, they mistook manatees for mermaids. But manatee, another name for it is sea cow. There was quite a reaction to this ad, but here's the thing, it went viral. Just one person got offended and used the internet and so on, and Target had to actually apologize and to change its color. So, and on a day like today, it's easy to recognize that there are 50 Shades of Gray. This is the book that's not on my American Lit syllabus. As a matter of fact, you won't even find it at the Fond du Lac Library because evidently some of those shades of gray are a little hot gray. We do have an underground copy of it circulating, I've been told, on campus though, and 50 Shades of... Sorry, Jim! Did you ever go to the internet and check just for like a fuzzy cat or something, and you see this? Oops. Did you ever go to see a fuzzy cat, and you learn that 3 people unfriended you. I'm sorry, Jim. But here's the thing, see who? See who? Who hasn't bought me a beer in the last month? Now you get software, actually, to find out who has unfriended you. Oh, well. One of the things we talk about in American literature, we don't usually use the word meme, but I kind of picked up on this word because it goes along with the whole idea of the evolutionary approach. In the word the selfish gene, Richard Dawkins, he defined meme as a unit of cultural transmission. And some of the things that pertain, I think, to strong language, potentially offensive language, they are pretty deeply rooted in our American culture, so I don't think they're going to go away very soon. He likens memes to genes in that they mutate, and some of them survive, and some of them don't, and some of them really prevail. And these are the ones, I think, that pertain to our subject for today. No matter how offensive you are in America, you're not going to get muzzled, are you? We just, the freedom of speech is just, sure, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, but anything other than that, people probably are not going to try to inhibit your language. And, this tendency to shoot from the hip, be plain spoken, it's just part of our genes as Americans, isn't it? So to speak. Also, wouldn't you agree, a anti-intellectual American gene or meme? I think we'll see some examples of that. A tendency towards strong language, a liking for the tall tale, and an inclination to give people a second chance. Usually a good thing, but probably if you take it too far, it probably perpetuates some of the offensive language that we'll see, that inclination to offer forgiveness. Richard Hofstadter, Hofstadter wrote the book on anti-intellectualism in American life, but we've seen some examples of it lately. I'm sorry, this is out of order. The emphasis on strong language. We've always loved these words, bamboozle, cahoots, boondoggle, and so on, those wildcat wrestling words, but back to the anti-intellectualism. I have blocked out the party so that nobody thinks I'm being partisan or biased. But back in January, Bobby Jindal, you probably saw this headline. He said to his fellow party members, "Stop being the stupid party." And was that helpful or not? I think a lot of people have wondered. Newt Gingrich didn't think it was very helpful. I'm sorry, not Newt Gingrich. Donald Trump says Bobby Jindal's stupid party remark could hurt. They're probably thinking, okay, there's the rural vote, there's the Latino vote, there's the stupid vote. We don't want to alienate the stupid vote. But in any event, John Kerry picked up on the same word a little later, and speaking abroad now, he's our Secretary of State. John Kerry proudly defends America's right to be stupid. Sorry. The stupid gene. Is this helpful for the conversation, I guess? Here's something that I'm not going to tell you what party this was either, so no one thinks I'm being partisan, but one of the parties in Texas had this as part of its platform. Knowledge-based education. We oppose the teaching of higher-order thinking skills. Students, is that what you hear in freshman seminar? Get rid of those higher-order thinking skills. Critical thinking skills in similar programs that are simply a relabeling, blah, 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 and have the purpose of challenging the students' fixed beliefs and undermining parental authority. Wow. That kind of goes against almost everything that we do at university, doesn't it? Oh well. And there's an article in Discovery Magazine rather recently that now there's a whole class of people, a segment of people who are just unpersuadable, for whom facts just make no difference whatsoever. Our ideological filters encourage us to interpret new evidence in ways that reinforce our beliefs. And so no matter how strong the facts, some people are just impervious to them. I know Mark Twain said there are three kinds of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. But still, you know. And then, you might have heard this too, Rick Santorum, one of the people running in the primaries, accused colleges and universities of being indoctrination mills. Do we do that? We want people to emerge with learning, oh man, community, social justice, spiritual, a knowledge of spiritual traditions, and social justice. There, I was afraid I wouldn't remember the good one, but is that indoctrination? I don't know. We also have this great meme, this great American gene for forgiveness, for giving people a second chance, and maybe a third chance and a fourth chance. And you know, sometimes I think this probably encourages people to say things that maybe they shouldn't have, or they should have thought a little bit more about. You've seen this guy, Bill Clinton. He did not have second. If you want to call it Clinton Gate, go right ahead. But you know what? He's come back, hasn't he? Here's the inauguration in January. I know that's Kelly Clarkson there, but there's Bill. And then, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Gee, that was a bad segue, come to think of it. I did not intend that imagery. But there's Rush. I sometimes call him Rush the Judgment, Limbaugh. And he did initiate what was briefly called Slutgate. One of the answers on your crossword puzzle is the name of that woman whom he did call a slut. I hope some people were offended by that. And there for a while, as you know, a lot of sponsors hold their advertising. But you know what? He was given, well, actually he's been given 7 or 8 chances, but he still needs to come back in, right? And as a matter of fact, not all women evidently were offended by that, because you could go there. Any in our audience today? Rush babes for a minute? Like you're going to admit it. So, here's this guy you probably didn't hear about, Palomar College. He was on the board, and then it was discovered that he had strong ties to an adult toy company that made anatomically correct sex dolls. And he was able to dissociate himself from that, and he got elected back onto the board. He was given a second chance. And I like this headline. He says that the sex doll claims were inflated. So, now, here's something a little inflated. And he did not, his job did not end up being quite as promising. Graham Zelensky, Democratic aide, compared Scott Walker to Jeffrey Dahmer. Is that a little bit over the top? Okay, that's a rhetorical question. And imagine having to apologize to the victims of Jeffrey Dahmer and to Scott Walker. So, oops. Donkey sanctuary. And then, have you seen this on the way to Madison? I got so excited, I just rappelled up there myself to make the message more resounding. And I don't know, I think of liberals and weapons of mass destruction, you know? Nothing overinflated about that, is there? Did anybody else wince at this one? This was just last week, where the head of the Colorado branch of the National Rifle Association said that it's time to hunt Democrats. He says, I liken it to the proverbial hunting season. We tell gun owners there's a time to hunt deer, and the next election is the time to hunt Democrats. Ouch. He's promising political payback. And then, this was an answer to another of the crossword puzzle questions. David Clark, he's the sheriff, one of the chief law enforcement agents in Milwaukee County. And is this a conversation starter? Is this a dialogue creator? Is there something mildly Freudian? You can't really call it a Freudian slip, can you? And, you know, I think Chris Abley wisely said nothing. What can you say? Here's another industry, along with managing anger and creating fear. Lots of opportunities for apologies. There are actually at least 3 books out right now on apologies, including The Age of Apology, aptly named I Was Wrong. Now, is this anti-intellectualism or what? Look inside. It's a book. Look inside. In any event, a new species of apology. You might say, after accusing someone of, can I say penis envy here? Obviously. After accusing someone of penis envy, wouldn't you think an apology was in order? He did apologize, but he apologized to Senator Lindsey Graham for something that the chief of police in Milwaukee had said. That's a new kind of apology today. I guess I call that the apology by proxy. So I have no problems apologizing for bad things that other people do. Do you? It's easy. Remember this guy? And don't you have to say, what was he thinking? Remember, he sexed. I don't have the pictures, don't worry. They're on the internet, don't believe me. And that is the answer to one of the crossword puzzle questions. He resigns after the sexting scandal. He didn't fare nearly as well as some of the other comeback kids. He pretty much rode out on a Wienermobile. Oops! Donkey Sanctuary. Another one on your crossword puzzle is purple prose, and this is a pretty good example of it, wherein the writing becomes much more fluid, eschewing quotidian sentences for elaborate concatenation of phrases and clauses. And I would say that comparing Scott Walker to Jeffrey Dahmer is probably a pretty good example of purple prose. Another kind of over-the-top writing from the color palette, yellow journalism. We live in an era of media sensationalism, from the courtroom to the campaign trail, inflammatory rhetoric. There are some historians who claim that yellow journalism actually led to the Spanish-American War, which they dub a media-driven war. The David Petraeus case. A lot of people, to David Petraeus, I think you remember the head of the CAA who had to resign after allegations. And the New York Post evidently won the award for the most over-the-top headline, quote, and shit. Here was the counterpart of the Washington Post headline, citing affair, Petraeus steps down from CIA. Which of those do you suppose beckoned more the come hither headline? There was an example, though, in the Harrisburg Patriot News of an even more bland headline than that. And here it is, decidedly non-sensational headline. Headline will go here, blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Whoops. As far as over-the-top language goes, hey, it's nothing new. It's not endemic just to the 20th century. One of the courses that I teach is a Shakespeare course, and man, nobody nobody is more ingenious and have more of a fertile imagination for insults than Mr. Shakespeare. And this is just a partial list, and people can just kind of take any one word in one column and put it in front of another. You cloud it, beef-witted baggage, or you currish clay-brained particle, and hundreds of insults for Mr. Shakespeare. I don't have a picture of this because the only image I could find was of actually another fuzzy cat making a phone call, and that's not at all what it meant. But if you think that everybody today is just rude and inconsiderate, many of us went on Friday to see the play in Milwaukee, Raisin in the Sun, and before we watched the play, they came on the stage and they said, if you are going to have a cough drop, please open the cough drop before the play begins so that there won't be those distracting noises. I needed a cough drop, it wasn't a problem. However, in 1660, in his diary, Samuel Pepys writes about going out and buying a little device called a catcall so he could most resoundingly express his disfavor of the plays in London that he saw. So I think we've come a ways in terms of not being rude, at least in certain venues. Speaking of getting people's attention by words that might seem over the top, George Carlin has the distinction of having been arrested for his word choice at Milwaukee's Summerfest in 1972 for saying the words then, at least, that you couldn't say on TV. And probably you're all hoping that I'll list those words now. And no, I'm not going to do that. But the 7 words that the ones that will infect your soul and curb your spine and keep the country from winning the war. Interestingly, that's not the one I wanted. Interestingly, that's not the one I wanted either. The person who arrested George Carlin just died last month, and in his obituary, I'm sure he did other illustrious things, but that was the thing that they mentioned in his obituary, that he was the arresting officer for George Carlin. So I guess, thought police, word police, do occasionally get their moment in the sun. Here is, in case you're wondering, does it have to be a really long and loud word to be offensive? Here's a word probably a lot of people have never heard, shibboleth. And what it refers to is, it's a story in the Bible where the Gileads and the Ephraimites were having a war, and the Gileads won, and they wanted to make sure that the Ephraimites couldn't come back into their country. And the way they did that was to use language as a revealer or a designator. And they knew that the Ephraimites didn't have the SH sound in their language. So they were asked, people coming back into the country were asked to say shibboleth. The poor Ephraimites couldn't say it. They said sibboleth, and they died. So talk about language that not only offends, but can actually kill you in that case. Part of the trip to Ireland is we are going to a city in the north of Ireland. It's very safe now. Three decades ago, we probably wouldn't go there. But the name of this town is a designator. The people from the Republic of Ireland, native Irish Catholics, call it Derry, and Protestants in Northern Ireland call it Londonderry. You can call it what you want now, but in earlier decades, that might have gotten you in trouble, just the pure name for it. In the north of Ireland, just the way you pronounce that letter can designate what your background is. Protestants pronounce it in the word herb, for instance. They would pronounce it just the way I did. Catholics would learn to pronounce it in Northern Ireland as herb. So, and another case in our century, back in 1937 in Dominican Republic, on the border area, a lot of Haitians were trying to infiltrate the border and come into the Dominican Republic. The Haitians were French Creole speakers, so at the border, the authorities made them pronounce the Spanish word for parsley. And would a Spanish speaker please pronounce it for us? Don't worry, you won't die. There, just what he said. There you go. If you pronounced it perigil, you die. And supposedly 30,000 people from Haiti did die in 1937 in the Parsley Wars. So you could even offend people by not using any words at all. And here's the answer to one of your crossword puzzles. Dog whistling. This was a new one on me as of this year. The use of coded, ambiguous language to appeal to the prejudices of certain subsets of voters. Dog whistle politics, also a type of political campaigning where it means one thing to a general population, but something different to another one. But we will now be experiencing technical difficulty that I realized earlier. I didn't really want to try and do that, but there we go. And you don't even have to use words at all to be offensive, not even phonemes or sounds. And the study of signs is called semiotics. And aren't there some signs that can be pretty offensive and insulting? In Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, you might remember if you've read that play, they're offending one another, the Capulets and the Montagues, by biting their thumbs, which would be pretty much the equivalent of the wardrobe malfunction. Do you see this one? If you did, you were one of 106 million people who did, because it was at the Super Bowl. But everybody recognize her?
Adele.
There's Adele, and she was not above doing that. And finally, so many people, I guess, were doing that they started to pixelate it. So here's Javier Garcia, and it's now pixelated. So, and you might say, oh, is that a new thing? Actually, the Romans had a word for it, and it was called digitus impudicus. So, and sometimes just pure absence of something can be pretty objectionable in sending a message. Over here is Joseph Stalin, and over here is a Stalin associate, and over here is Joseph Stalin, and there is a former Stalin. When you have that kind of power, you can just kind of make things disappear, and he did. Euphemisms. This is kind of the other side of the whole. I don't want to get into that other issue because we could spend the whole hour on that. Just a little item about email messaging. Are there cases in which emails can seem rude in ways that aren't intended? And should you spend a little time, particularly if you're sending an email to, let's say, an English professor, should you spend a little time? Should you think for just a second about what to call the person, or should you just slap it down there and say, hey? What's in her name? And yeah, students get about 43 chances during the semester to figure out what we want to be called. So, call us something. That was the one I passed over, but I guess I didn't really pass it over. In some ways, people might say that it's not those yellow journalism sensational words or the purple prose that are most offensive, but that kind of the beige words are ones that can also offend deeply. And we call these euphemisms, words that attempt to mask the truth. In some cases, just in an annoying kind of way. Don't you love it when you run to the phone, you're out of the shower, coming out of the shower, dripping wet, and they say, oh, I'm sorry, this is a courtesy call. If you were being courteous, you wouldn't have called me. You wonder about that extra charge on your bill, and they explain it as a service charge. So, but T.S. Eliot said, humankind cannot stand very much reality. He also said, by the way, April's the cruelest month, and I think we believe him today, don't we? You might say, oh, are those new things? No, they go all the way back to the Romans and the Greeks and beyond. Biting the dust, which means dying, is in Homer's Iliad. The Romans used the word strategic movement to the rear, the phrase for retreat. We already saw giving the finger is deeply rooted in Western culture. The word toilet evolves from the word that just meant little claw. And I love this one, Eric the Red dubbing Greenland with the with that name. Because there's not much green in Greenland. In England, this is called Queen Victoria's bathing machine. And Queen Victoria, during that era that is named after her, the Victorian age, she was so into privacy that she did not want anybody to see her going into the sea. So they devised this, what they called bathing machine, so that nobody would have to see her at all. And I thought this is a good metaphor for the way a lot of words get kind of bathed and bleached, and so that the real reality of them sometimes gets concealed. And you might wonder why doing that. According to Alexis de Tocqueville, here's the reason: respect for the moral freedom of women, that in the presence of a woman, the most guarded language is used, lest your ear should be offended. During the Victorian period, probably not only for women, but the general populace, instead of referring to arms and legs, which I don't know, just kind of conjure up the image of arms and legs. Whereas the word limbs is so much safer, isn't it? So much less arousing. The word poultry leg from this era, because people don't want to think of legs, so potentially arousing. That's where we get the word drumstick, so you don't have to think of anatomy when you're eating something. Poultry breast becomes white meat. This one, you have to just be amazed at the ingenuity here. They didn't want to say that word. You probably want me to say it. Oh, say it, you fart. They didn't want to say fart, but they figured, well, if we say a word that rhymes with it, people will know what we mean without actually saying the offending word. So they called it a raspberry tart. That was a little problematic, though, because tart was also, in the Victorian period, a slang word for prostitute. So you couldn't say raspberry tart, so they got rid of the tart, and now you just have raspberries. And so when someone gives someone the raspberries, basically this roundabout way of avoiding that harmful word. This is one of my favorites. Queen Victoria supposedly told her daughter this: sex on the wedding night for a woman, close your eyes and think of England. Do it for the sake of your, it's terrible, nobody wants it, but just do it for your country. And you might think, oh, those Victorians were so into prudery that surely there weren't any kind of sexual, peccadillos and so. Well, evidently there were, because there were quite a few euphemistic words for mistress. A left-handed wife, a wife in watercolors, a convenient, or a prostitute with only one client. Prostitute was an unfortunate woman. Condoms were French letters. Syphilis, the French gout. Prostitute with syphilis, a fire ship. Honey, I'll be late tonight. I'm just going down to the Thames. There's a fire ship coming in from... yeah. Now, who's being protected there with the euphemisms? This is also the period, I see people filling in their crossword puzzles, of Bowdlerizing, which means to censor something by getting rid of words considered vulgar. And Thomas Bowdler, as it turns out, we find out 80 years later that it's really his sister, Henrietta, that was doing the Bowdlerizing, in other words, the censoring. But Bowdler censored the complete works of Shakespeare, and so now we have the Bowdler Shakespeare. So you could read Shakespeare without having to encounter some of those nasty words. So Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet, when he talks about the prick of noon, is Bowdlerized to become the point of noon, in case anybody should... Now, you can see why Henrietta didn't want to be associated with that undertaking. How about Lady Macbeth's out, damn spot? Well, that is really not only out, that is out of the Bowdler Shakespeare. And you might say, well, if you have to censor Shakespeare, what else needed censoring during the Victorian period? The Bible. And this was the King James version of the Bible from 1611, under King James. Noah Webster, who gave us our dictionary, of course, gave us a censored version of the Bible, so that you could read the Bible without encountering words like whore or harlot or fornication, words like that. Example. And he said, purity of mind is a Christian virtue that ought to be carefully guarded. Purity of language is one of the guards which protect this virtue. Yeah. So, are you kind of thinking, which is worse, really strong language that is like over the top, or like language that has been like bleached of meaning? Both of them can be objectionable, can't they? Another rule for euphemisms is putting the word in French makes it sound so much better. So pornographic novel, I don't know, that just kind of reminds you of pornography. Whereas calling it a French novel, that sounds really classy, doesn't it? Condom sounds so much like what we know it is, but so much more superior a French letter. Lover's triangle, I don't know, it sounds like so complicated. A menage a trois. You hardly ever see that on Facebook, though, do you? Relationship status. Menage a trois. It's complicated. And then, here's something Alexander Pope said, there are certain things that don't make you a better person for knowing. And I kind of apologize for knowing this, but a complicated sexual encounter. Please don't tell me anymore. I don't want to know. The French expression is Eiffel Tower. So ask somebody who's 16. Modern euphemisms, categorical inaccuracy. Anybody? Categorical inaccuracy? A lie. Plausible denial? A lie. Friendly fire, of course, collateral damage. Sorties, bombing missions. Pre-owned instead of used car. Right? Which would you rather have, a used car or pre-owned? Somebody's broken it in for you. I love this one. There's one in Milwaukee. Come to think of it, it's not too far from the bunker shop. A pre-use center. Because certain things you have to kind of shop for before you need them. Anybody know what the pre-use center? Your own funeral arrangements. Shop for covert opera, you got the idea. I like this one, friends with benefits. Probably a lot of people are looking at their benefit packages now. On the plane out a couple of weeks ago, across the seat from me was a woman who about 10 minutes into the flight opened up a basket and a dog popped out and sat on her lap. And my wife wasn't with me, but if she were, we'd have a real problem because she's allergic to dogs. But as it turns out, when I asked afterwards, they said, well, it's an emotional support animal. That having that dog calms the fears of. You suppose that one's subject to abuse? Because it also saves you $100 if your pet is an emotional support. This one is my debts to George Carlin, self-help books. George Carlin says, hey, if you have to go to a book for self-help, you're not really helping yourself, are you? Never occurred to me, but there are actually people that have come up with indexes of euphemisms, the fog or pomposity index, the relationship between the number of letters and syllables in the original word and then the stand-in word. And someone has actually come up, Gresham as it turns out, with the law of succession law of euphemisms, and the idea that the original euphemism, reality starts peeking in and people realize what it means, so they have to change it, and all kinds of interesting permutations result. We no longer use the word crippled or crippled. Instead, handicapped was the successor to that, but then handicapped seemed to, I don't know, so we had to come up with disabled. Admittedly, though, what are the parking spots for disabled people called? They're called go figure. And then disabled is no longer very politically correct, so it becomes differently abled. Same thing, ass, actually, was originally a euphemism for arse. And then people started seeing the reality behind it, so they had to come up with a euphemism for ass, and what was it but arse? And then you notice my retirement home, the Donkey Sanctuary, it's not really called the arse sanctuary, is it? But, so maybe someday a donkey will be euphemized and not euthanized. George Carlin, this is his, I want to say favorite, but he says that in World War I, when soldiers came back from the wars, they came back with shell shock. And everybody knew what it meant, and it was 2 syllables. When they came back from World War II, though, they came back with a 4-syllable syndrome, battle fatigue. Korean War was up to 8 syllables, operational exhaustion. And after Vietnam, we're now up to 8 syllables and a hyphen, post-traumatic stress disorder. And George Carlin, I should say the late George Carlin, because I was going to say he died, but I'll say he passed away, I think in 2008. This one really, really angered him, and probably one of the most shocking things I put up here is this next slide. It's the right one. Yeah, and this is a fact from the Veterans Administration, just as of last week. 22 veterans coming back from Iraq, the Gulf War, and Afghanistan. 22 a day are dying of suicide. And of all of the ugly utterances up there, it doesn't have to be one of the most shocking ones. George Carlin says, maybe if people called the situation by what it is, maybe people would get the help that they need and have their situation addressed. So, our sense of community cries out for that. What's in a name? On Thursday, I'm looking at the clock because I want to give time for questions, what have you. On Thursday, UNESCO, a branch of the United Nations, is designating a new state. And that state is going to be designated garbage patch. And there are actually 5 of them. And what the garbage patches are really large masses of garbage in the oceans. One is bigger than the state of Texas. Here's a guy canoeing through one of the new garbage patch areas. There's Juliet, what's in the name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Is calling it a state, designating it as having nation status, going to make those mounds of garbage go away. No, but UNESCO feels that it'll call attention to it, and maybe it will get the help it needs. How do you pronounce, okay, I'm not going to say older people. People older than 25, would you pronounce this word for us? Uranus, right? People under, okay, boy, am I setting things up for people under 25, would you pronounce that word for us? Uranus. What? It used to be called Uranus, and now people are calling it Uranus. Is that a real good example of euphemism? You can go on YouTube if you want and hear both of them pronounced, and you'll probably hear the Uranus. And you might say, why? What's the matter with? Maybe we should just call it the seventh planet from the sun and avoid the whole deal. I guess they felt that Uranus was too much reminiscent of Uranian. But did you see this headline? I love this. APA ban. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not the one I wanted, but it's coming up soon. But tomorrow also, Associated Press is releasing its new style sheet, and they're trying to get rid of the word in newspapers, illegal immigrant, and instead are recommending that people say immigrants who are in the country illegally. So that's what's in a word, a rose by any other name, the smell is sweet. What they claim is that they're trying to depoliticize that word so we can discuss the pathway to citizenship more rationally. Lego has taken this toy off the market because some people regarded it as insulting. They did indicate that it was not in response to complaints, but we're scrapping Star Wars toy, but not because of Muslim backlash. Have you heard this situation? A professor I better stop very soon. A professor in Florida Atlantic University, he was using a book by a professor up at St. Norbert's up the road, and the exercise was to write the word Jesus on a piece of paper in the class, and then ask students to step on the piece of paper with the word Jesus on it. And of course, several people refused to do it, and it became a huge issue. And I think you can see why it did become a huge issue, and why some people said it's just a piece of paper. Other people said, no, it's not. It's the name of the Son of God, and so on. Talk about how something seemingly impalpable can become hugely offensive, or for other people, a huge non-issue. Cheryl indicated that I spent a whole number of years at Marquette, about 10, but during that period there were two nasty things that happened with faculty members. The one was that a faculty member got a student pregnant. That was pretty nasty. But that wasn't nearly as nasty as he was a philosophy professor who took a backpack and put it on the crucifix. Which one of those acts was like life-changing or damaging or having big consequences? Well, which one do you suppose begot more anger and letters to the editor and so on? Was any damage done to the crucifix? No, but doesn't that testify to the power of symbolism? And what are words if not symbols? So I think I made most of my points, but in the last part, the part I won't get to, I was just indicating that even while we have big issues that we need to talk about, and big areas that need discussion, in some ways there's more and more closing off, and gated communities, literally 10% of Americans now evidently live in a community with an actual gate. But probably of more concern, gated communities of the mind, where people can talk to one another, talk to other people without ever hearing a dissenting voice, without ever hearing a different view on things. And that makes it a lot easier, doesn't it, to demonize someone if you don't have to hear their part of the story. I have a section I didn't get to on banned books, but mostly they are the list of books, aren't they? Almost every book that ends up on a literature list at some point or another has been banned. And it's usually the words that people focus in on, and they say, that N-word in Huckleberry Finn, that's the offensive part, or the F-word in Catcher in the Rye, or people even found things that offended their community standards. That's number one across, by the way, in Moby Dick. Moby Dick! Why is it dangerous to censor literature? Because literature, it's not just the words, right? It's the idea that the existing arrangement of society is being challenged, alternative views are being put forward. Literature enables us to empathize with people that we might not otherwise encounter, to encounter people that are the other, and make us able to walk in their shoes for the duration of the reading and afterwards. So let me stop there, because I started by saying that too often we talk to ourselves rather than entering into dialogue with other people, and I don't want to model that by going on and on. So questions, comments, reactions? Did everybody get all of the crossword puzzle answers? Because I think that a few of them were in the part today. That'll be next class. You'll all come back for my next class.
Jerry, you got a student question. Jason, go ahead.
Earlier you stated that you had an opinion that the United States was a country that was becoming divided more and more every day. I would have to agree with you because we see, for example, a lot. Going forward, dealing with incivility and euphemisms, why do you think those are used as such powerful tools these days, whether it be through literature, language, media, or whatever?
Why are euphemisms used as such powerful tools? Incivility. Anybody else have a thought on that while I think of a response? Probably because they work. They get the strong language, the over-the-top language gets people's attention, doesn't it? And you have the 24-hour news cycle, and there's the potential of your utterance going viral, given that great demand for news and for people wanting the next gate coming up, Slutgate, what have you. Euphemistic words, I think they are so prevalent because they do kind of mask things for us. They allow us to avoid seeing undesirable realities. I think aren't a lot of people very anxious to not think about the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, the Gulf War, and just kind of put it in the rearview mirror as fast as they can? And euphemisms help us do that. If you can say that there was collateral damage in Afghanistan rather than saying that 10 civilians were killed in a drone attack, the reality goes away and you don't have to deal with it. Anybody else want to respond?
On that same topic, in today's media, we've been able to box ourselves in with the internet. On Facebook, we only see or hear the things that we want to see. We're only friends with the people that we like. Thanks to cable news, we only watch the channel that we agree with. All of these things, so we're living in our own little bubbles, whether we like it or not.
Real good. I agree. Living in our own bubble. Talk radio, 22% of Americans now spend a good bit of time listening to talk radio, but aren't they pretty much listening to people just like themselves and having their own views reinforced, corroborated, amplified? Now you can even listen to your own channel or watch your own TV channel all the time and have, the ideological filters.
When you talked about the AP style sheet, could you talk about that a little bit? Because they're influencing how we as society think about something by changing the words. I remember when it went from like pro-life to pro-choice, and years ago I remember suddenly it was in the 1 month it was in the paper one way, and suddenly it was being worded another way, and that's when that's like 25 years ago or something, became aware of the AP style sheet. And there, you talked about the example, and I'm just wondering about the influence of that in society and culture and how we think about it too.
Anybody else want to respond to that? Well, I think
It's shaping our thought.
it does. It shapes our thought. And what do you call the impasse? Talk about not being able to reach a compromise, or for some people, I think compromise has actually become a dirty word. What are we calling the fact that we have a budget right now that nobody likes, that kind of arbitrarily cuts things, and that it resulted because Congress can't arrive at a decision involving compromise? And what is the word, I'm not sure whether the Associated Press would recommend it or not, but what is the word that means nothing to anybody that is being used for that? Sequestration. Talk about a euphemism that, quick, what does sequestration, I don't know. It sure doesn't seem to mean that. George Orwell focuses on particularly political language as being something that can make things go away or make them more palatable. Sequestration kind of makes it go away by giving us a word that nobody seems to know what it means. Associated Press, maybe one of the communication people can weigh in on that, but what I think the Associated Press tries to do, I'm sure it has its detractors, but I think they try to come up with neutral words for things that might otherwise seem, biased. Like, for instance, under Ronald Reagan's administration, he came up with the phrase, the social safety net. And that's one of those words that, I would say that's a good example of dog whistle politics, because for some people, social safety net is like, thank God, the thing that my salvation. For other people, social safety net is something absolutely repulsive and giving freeloaders, a free ride, and so on. So I think the Associated Press tries to come up with words that are more neutral, that don't have that political valence to them. But I think the reality is it's hard to think of words that don't have some. There's another example, entitlement programs. Probably for 50% of the population, you just said a dirty word, entitlement. Or Newt Gingrich branded Mr. Obama with the phrase, the food stamp president, right? I guarantee that the Associated Press would not sanction that use, because that's obviously loaded. But the thing is, it's loaded, in two different ways, right? If you're a recipient of food stamps, hooray, the food stamp president. But for opponents, of course, it's like a damning phrase. So I think that's what Associated Press, they try to avoid those things that are emotionally loaded. Other people, you don't have to aim them at me, feel free to interact.
Jared, you got questions over here. Out of your way.
Kind of going back to the comment that was made earlier about how we only listen and see and watch what we want to watch. Do you feel that people are afraid to talk to others in fear of engaging in incivility with those that their views and their ideals don't match?
What do other people think of something? Trying to think of something you said?
I know my family, I have quite a big family, and it's now the policy based after years of arguments. That when the family gets together, we don't discuss politics, we just, it's the rule. So I think that's definitely the case.
Yeah, it seems to be changing a lot where those sensitive subjects don't come up at family events, public events like this. It's kind of one of those things where you stay away from in fear of different ideals and almost that headbanging, my idea doesn't fit yours, I'm right, you're wrong, and that whole ideal. And I feel that Dr. Bernson said that you should engage in conversation with others instead of only with yourself. I feel like that's one of the things that we're afraid to do because if our ideals don't match, that conversation can go south very quick.
You just said the conversation goes south. I wonder, do they say that in like Alabama? This conversation's going south. I want to know about the Associated Press. Would they sanction that? Or do they say this conversation's going north? because it's not, for them it's not the Civil War, it's the war of northern aggression. So. But you're right. You might, if you're going to talk about politics, you might just as well talk about sex, right? As far as you're going to get in, deep, really quickly. Religion, probably just the same way.
Jared, I think the issue is identification with whatever it is that we're using, whatever words we're using. And that identification process becomes such a problem because people need to feel like they have to preserve their own integrity or they preserve their own identity. So therefore, they identify with Democrat, Republican, or whatever, or they identify with this idea or that idea. And then in the process of that, then when someone opposes that, it's really an affront to their personhood. And that to me is a real problem in our whole culture today. We take everything so personally.
And you've probably seen those statistics. It's like Wisconsin literally is the most divided state in the whole country in terms of the number of Republicans who support Mr. Obama in Wisconsin, 3%. 3%. 95% of Democrats in Wisconsin are supportive of President Obama. And almost everything kind of divides. We're a real purple state. But I like purple. And identity politics, that people's identities at stake.
I think one last question because I'm the moderator. We have one time. We have time.
She's moderating. You're trying to use strong language and she's trying to moderate.
Okay, I'm stopping it.
Get the duct tape.
Last session we talked about freedom of speech, and now we're talking about the evolution of language. Because those two coincide these days, I'm just curious on your opinions, because the two coincide, what is, in your opinion, core values of freedom of speech?
Boy, can someone answer that? Well, I think I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, basically freedom of speech and what we're talking about now, evolution of language, because they coincide. What do you think is the main purpose of freedom of speech? Like, what are the core values of it?
To allow us to express our most deeply held beliefs. And if you want a resounding answer to that, that brings my talk back to the beginning, I really do think that many of us are interested in moving towards a more perfect union, And you're not going to arrive at a more perfect union without talking to people that you disagree with. Right? And so the freedom of speech, how do we know whether we agree with people or not if they don't feel like they're free to express their viewpoints? And as he said, you know, so many people feel like they're walking on eggshells. Maybe I'll say the wrong thing. I think we need to move past that. I think as long as someone is being addressed respectfully, you know, that's what I think we encourage. And you could call people, you could address people in a lot of different ways and still be respectful. Whereas you could use really high-sounding accolades towards someone and be really dissing them, couldn't you? Sir, Professor Byrne. So I mean, it's like we're so often really, you know, unnerved by the language that we use. I think we just need to relax and chill out sometimes.
I'd like to thank Dr. Burns for his really, really fine presentation. I'd also like to briefly address the last question, and that is really the topic of the whole symposium. So all of the succeeding presentations will come closer, hopefully, to answering that question. And to remind you of that, the next presentation will be on trial. It's on trial, hate speech, harmless prank, or college prank. Hate speech or college prank.